Hey Vianny, hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for sending over your check-in, and it was great working with you the other day. Thank you so much for coming out, and I do really feel really good about the work that we did together in person. And I think we're going to get along just fine, especially if you're into learning about the theory behind the lift. So moving forward, I will make sure to include some of that stuff in the discussion. And also, keep this feedback going if there's anything that I could be doing better or if anything that you need further explanation on or anything like that. I typically pride myself on not being too dogmatic. Coaches can be very dogmatic at certain points, and trying to be as thoroughly helpful as possible. So if there's anything that I can do better, feel free to let me know. So going into your check-in, glad that week one, block one went well. Let me know where you're moving to. It's moving always sucks. If are you, I wonder if you're moving closer to the gym or further away from the gym. But with that, moving is always one of the most stressful things that someone can go through, especially living in this city. So hopefully that goes well, and let me know how it went. Motivation to train at a 9, fantastic. Quality of training sessions at a 9, that's great. Keep me posted. The reason why I ask these questions, stress, motivation, and quality of training sessions, is really an ability to recover. Is primarily because I'm trying to track on a weekly basis how ready you are to push it and how ready you are for a deload. Um, Again, I'm just going to assume that and pardon me if you already know this, but in this type of situation, just kind of going into a small explanation here. The big reason why we keep track of these variables is because when motivation starts to fade and when quality of training sessions start to go down and regressions start to happen, that's usually a sign that there's something wrong, right? It's basically a canary in a coal mine type of situation. So that will lead me to kind of ask more questions about like what's going on in your personal life, what's going on in your professional life, just because there's three main variables that can really affect your progress. One of them being nutrition, the other one being sleep, and the other one being stress management. So these kind of tie into these questions because if our motivation is going down, or if our quality of training sessions is going down, or if we're regressing, it kind of means that there's something in the chain on those variables that is going wrong or is being under recovered. Most of the time, overtraining is not really a major scare, just because every between 4 to 8 weeks or so, usually the athlete will deload to a certain degree. Given that you're in a novice position with your programming, I don't expect us to deload for a while. The newer the individual is, the easier it is for them to keep pushing and making progressions week to week without having to really even think about doing a deload. However, if someone is newer into powerlifting, but they just moved and not eating enough and not sleeping enough and work is going crazy, and to add one more thing into there, like they got into an argument with their best friend, those things will greatly affect our ability to provide full attention and athleticism to our powerlifting. So the reason why I ask the majority of the questions that you have to answer during the check-in is just to track to see how well you're recovering, but also to see how well you're paying attention to the other variables that affect your progressions. So, for example, going into your skipping ahead to your macronutrient intake, having protein be 157, having carbs be 130, and having fats be 40 is fantastic. I do want to track that weight and see where that weight kind of brings us. But 157, 130, and 40 is a really great macronutrient profile. You're certainly hitting a large amount of protein, which is fantastic. Carbohydrates are being just enough for you to kind of push it in the gym, and fats being low because that's more so for organ health and for general health and wellness, but not necessarily able to metabolize very nicely as energy. So the fact that you're getting 7 hours of sleep at night, the fact that your motivation to train is high, and the fact that your average macronutrient intake is very beneficial means that you are doing as much as I can ask you to do to be better as a lifter. So it truly is these variables that really make the ceiling of an athlete's potential higher, and will also make the likelihood of missing a training week due to deloads and stuff like that a lot lower. So great job this week. You're really knocking it out of the park here. I am very, very happy with how things are starting off. So nice job. So for comp squats, the 320, I figured that I give you some feedback on these movements, but also kind of give a little bit of a reminder of what we talked about on that day. So for the 3-2-0, you called it out yourself, which I always enjoy because it makes my job easier. So I'm just kidding. So 3-2-0 with 5 at 8 at 105. Yeah, our pause at the very bottom wasn't always consistently there, but it also that didn't mean that it was completely off the mark. So, for example, like when you hit your 2-second pauses, there were some reps that you actually did do the 2-second pause, but some of the reps, especially like the last rep and the first rep, we kind of had a 1-second pause at the bottom of our position. So with what we're bringing to tempo squats should also be what we're bringing to comp squats. So just as a quick reminder of what we're like really thinking about here is that we want to anticipate the balance only on comp squats, but not on pause, not on tempo squats. So from here, remember to make sure that we're following these couple of directions. You're trying to breathe all your air out so your ribs kind of pull down. So notice that I'm kind of hyperextended like so. So I'm going to breathe all my air out. And that's going to pull my ribs into my abs. Once I feel my ribs into my abs, I'm going to brace my abs as hard as I can. And I'm going to breathe into my stomach as hard as I can like so. So notice that it kind of expands like this. Right? So I'm trying to push out against the belt as hard as I can. And then lastly, I'm going to squeeze my glutes. Right? So from here, instead of being slightly hyperextended, or in your case being slightly underextended, we're going to squeeze the glutes to kind of like fix that positioning in our pelvis. And then from there, once you're there, you're going to break softly at the hips and knees. So once you're braced and you're breathing into your stomach, you're going to break softly like so, and then count 1, 2, 3, below parallel, 1, 2, push your back into the bar, keep your hips underneath your ribs. So notice that like when I come up, I don't want to hyperextend, and I don't want to like, have flexion in my spine. I want to keep my hips directly underneath my ribs as I'm coming up, and then squeezing my glutes when I finish. All right. So squeezing your glutes when you finish is super, super important on the ascent, and also most importantly on your deadlift. With your deadlift, I don't know I'm jumping around a little bit, but just kind of this is a really awesome segue into it. With the deadlift, there's really two things that I want you to focus on. Overall, I'm very happy with how this looks, and it's clear that Nikhil was able to help you out with your deadlifts. So great job to him, and great job to you for like incorporating those cues. But the main thing that we want to focus on with the deadlift are two things. The first thing is getting your lats more involved in the lift. So when you're at the bottom of your position, you do a good job of keeping your chest up, but I'm not necessarily sure if we're really feeling our lats turn on, okay? So when you're at the bottom of your position, right? When I'm at my bottom of my position, notice that my shoulders are kind of rolled forward, and my shoulders are kind of rolling towards my neck like so. What I want to think about is closing my armpits down and pulling my shoulder blades back as hard as I possibly can. Another good way to think about this is pretending like you have a fruit stuck in your armpit and you're trying to close that fruit down as hard as you possibly can so you feel it in your lats. We talked about this a little bit by pulling down in the bar. That same sensation of pulling down in the bar should also be breaking the bar over your shoulder, over your shins when you're setting up for your deadlift. This will turn on your lats, and this will make you feel a little bit tighter, and this will also help take the slack completely out of the barbell. And the second thing is that once you're above the knee, let's really make sure that we give our glutes a very, very fast and aggressive squeeze, right? So from here, what we're seeing in your deadlift right now is that your shoulders are rolled forward, your back is nice and straight though, you're breaking the bar off the ground, and then you lock out slowly, like so. What I want you to think about is once you're right above the knee, squeeze your glutes as hard as you possibly can. The best way to think about this is pretend like you are trying to pinch your butt cheeks together as hard as you can clench, all right? And so as soon as you're above the knee, clench hard, and you should feel your glutes and hamstrings light up to a much higher degree. And so therefore that will innervate and activate your hamstrings and glutes. Because one of the biggest mistakes that I've ever did when I was starting off in powerlifting is that I didn't really care too much about feeling the muscle. I cared a lot more about moving the weight. And that's one thing that I want to impart differently in the approach that I'm giving someone rather than my old coach giving me, is that I want you to really make sure that you're feeling the muscles as much as you are moving the weight, okay? So once you're above the knee, squeeze your glutes, you should feel your hamstrings and glutes light up, and also it should take off a lot more pressure off your lower back. With comp bench, I know we talked a lot about bar path, but what I want you to really commit to on your comp bench going forward is hitting it a little bit lower. So on that video, you were hitting like right on breast. What I want you to think about is making contact like past the underwire of a sports bra, right? So when you're coming down, try to make contact like right here and not like right here, okay? Once you make that contact, that'll be much more favorable for you to express that bar path for yourself. Sorry, I got a text message. So when you make contact here, you're pushing towards your shoulders and then up rather than straight up like this, right? So the number one thing I want you to really think about here is locking out closer to your shoulders rather than closer to over your chest, okay? Don't overcompensate and push towards your face, because remember, the moment that you're right over your shoulders, you are right at that center of gravity, so you have the best opportunity for you to press and lock it out, all right? So with that being said, Vianny, I think that's all I have for you. Let me know if you have any other questions, and also let me know when you want to stop by next. I processed the 10-pack for you, and I took off one of the sessions because of the first meeting that we had. So let me know when I can expect you next, and then we'll go from there. And of course, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to let me know. All right, talk to you soon. Have a good one.